The sound of footsteps echoed through the dimly lit church. Michael stood frozen at the altar, his hands trembling. The woman before him glared with a mix of fury and betrayal. "How could you?" she spat, her voice trembling. "You made me believe you were just like us, a simple man with a humble life. But you're not. You're nothing but a liar." The few villagers who had gathered for the evening service murmured amongst themselves, their whispers growing louder. Michael tried to speak, but his voice failed him. He knew this moment would come, but he had hoped it wouldn't hurt this much. As the woman stormed out, the heavy wooden doors slammed shut behind her, leaving Michael to face the stares of the villagers. "Who is he, really?" one of them whispered. "He's no farmer, that's for sure," another replied. Michael lowered his head, his mind racing. How did it all come to this? He had only wanted to find someone who loved him for who he was, not for his billions. The small village church was quiet except for the echoing sound of footsteps on the stone floor. The sun was setting, casting long shadows through the stained glass windows. Michael stood at the altar, his shoulders heavy with an invisible weight. The room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a courtroom, and he was the accused. Before him stood Julia, the village beauty, her fiery eyes piercing through him. Her hands clenched into fists, and her voice trembled with a mix of anger and disbelief. "How could you lie to all of us?" she demanded, her voice slicing through the silence. "You came here, pretending to be one of us. A farmer. Humble, struggling, honest. But you're none of those things, are you?" Michael opened his mouth to respond, but the words stuck in his throat. He could feel the judgmental eyes of the villagers boring into him, their murmurs growing louder. "I thought you were different," Julia continued, her voice breaking. "I thought, for a moment, you were sincere. But you're just another arrogant rich man who thinks he can toy with people's lives." The crowd gasped, and Michael's heart sank. He had prepared for this possibility when he first embarked on his journey, but no amount of planning could brace him for the sting of those words. "It wasn't like that," he finally said, his voice low but steady. "I came here because I wanted to find something real, something genuine. Not this." He gestured toward the crowd, the judgment in their eyes, the whispers that felt like daggers. Julia let out a bitter laugh. "Real? Genuine? You lied about who you are. Do you think that's how trust is built? You think you can fool us all and then talk about honesty?" The murmurs grew louder now, the villagers huddling together, exchanging theories about who Michael really was. Who is he? Why would a rich man come here pretending to be poor? Do you think he's running from something? Michael turned to the crowd, his face flushed. "I'm not running from anything," he said firmly, his voice rising above the chatter. "I left the city because I was tired of the lies, the superficiality, the fake smiles. I wanted to find someone who would see me for who I really am. Not the billionaire, not the businessman, but the man beneath it all." His words hung in the air, met with stunned silence. For a brief moment, he thought he saw a flicker of understanding in some of their eyes. But Julia wasn't finished. "And you thought the best way to do that was to deceive us?" she snapped. "What kind of love can you find when you start with a lie?" Michael looked at her, his chest tightening. "Maybe you're right," he admitted. "Maybe this was a mistake. But I had to try. I had to believe there was more to love than gold and status. I didn't want someone who loved my wealth. I wanted someone who loved me." Julia's expression softened for a fraction of a second, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. She shook her head, stepping back. "You don't get it, do you? You're not the victim here, Michael. We are. You came into our lives, pretending to be someone you're not. How are we supposed to trust anything you say now?" With that, she turned and stormed out, her heels clicking against the stone floor. The heavy wooden doors of the church slammed shut behind her, the sound reverberating through the space. Michael stood there, alone at the altar, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He glanced at the villagers, their faces a mix of confusion, anger, and disappointment. How did it come to this? He thought to himself. He had come to this village with nothing but good intentions, hoping to escape the hollowness of his old life. But now, it felt like he had only brought that hollowness with him. A voice broke through his thoughts. Is it true? It was Anna, the quiet schoolteacher who had been kind to him from the start. She stepped forward, her eyes searching his. Are you really not who you said you were? Michael hesitated, then nodded. It's true. My name is Michael Carter. In the city, people know me as one of the richest men in the country. But I left all of that behind to come here. To find something real. Anna studied him, her expression unreadable. You say you wanted something real, but everything you've done so far has been built on a lie. How do you expect us to believe anything you say now? Michael opened his mouth to respond, but Anna held up a hand. Save it, she said. You've already said enough. She turned and walked away, leaving Michael alone in the church. The villagers began to disperse, their whispers following him like shadows. As the last of them left, Michael sank onto a pew, burying his face in his hands. He had come here looking for love, for truth, for connection. But all he had found was heartbreak and rejection. Yet, deep down, he knew he couldn't give up. Not yet. Somewhere in this village, there had to be someone who would see him for who he truly was. Someone who would look past the lies and see the man beneath. This was far from over. The moonlight bathed the quiet village in a soft glow as Michael sat alone in the church, staring at the flickering candles on the altar. The whispers of the villagers had long since faded, replaced by the rhythmic chirping of crickets. Despite the stillness around him, Michael's thoughts churned like a storm. How did it all go so wrong? He wondered. The memory of Julia's outburst was fresh in his mind. Her words had cut deep, but they weren't entirely wrong. He had lied, and now the truth was out. But how else could he have escaped the superficiality of his old life? Michael Carter was not just wealthy. He was one of the wealthiest men in the country. His empire spanned industries, real estate, technology, and luxury goods. To outsiders, he seemed to have it all: mansions, private jets, and a lifestyle others could only dream of. But to Michael, it was a gilded cage. For years, he had lived among people who saw him as nothing more than a wallet. Women fawned over him not for his heart, but for his bank account. Friends vanished the moment he refused to fund their whims. Even family members treated him like an ATM. He had tried dating women from his social circle, thinking that shared wealth might create a deeper connection. But time after time, he was proven wrong. The women were more interested in his cars than his character, his business ventures than his dreams. Michael's breaking point came during a gala in the city. He had taken a woman named Victoria, a fashion model with a stunning smile and a sharp wit, or so he thought. The evening had been perfect until he overheard her laughing with her friends, saying, "I'll marry him for 2 years, divorce him, and walk away with half. Easy money." That night, Michael decided he had had enough. The idea to leave everything behind came to him while he was sitting in his penthouse, staring at the glittering city skyline. What if he stripped away the wealth, the status, the privileges? What if he could meet someone who didn't know Michael Carter, the billionaire, but simply Michael, the man? It was a crazy idea, but the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. He needed to find someone who valued love, loyalty, and kindness, qualities money couldn't buy. With the help of his most trusted advisor, Thomas, Michael devised a plan. He sold off one of his smaller properties, a modest farmhouse on the outskirts of a rural village, and purchased a few acres of land. He traded his designer suits for faded jeans, his luxury car for an old pickup truck, and his penthouse for a one-room cottage with a leaky roof. Thomas had been skeptical. "Are you sure about this, Michael? Living as a poor farmer is no small task. It's hard work, and the people you meet might not be as welcoming as you think." Michael had smiled. "That's the point, Thomas. I want to live like them, work like them. I want to find someone who'll love me for me, not for what I have." The first few weeks in the village had been grueling. Michael had never worked on a farm before, and it showed. His hands, once soft from a life of luxury, were now blistered and calloused. He spent his days tending to the crops, fixing the broken-down tractor, and learning the ways of rural life from his neighbors. The villagers had been suspicious of him at first. "What kind of farmer doesn't know how to milk a cow?" one elderly man had scoffed. But over time, Michael's genuine effort and humility began to win them over. At least, some of them. Then came the rejections. Michael had approached women in the village, hoping to find someone who shared his values. But time and again, he was turned down. Julia, the village beauty, had been the most painful rejection. She had laughed in his face when he proposed, calling him a foolish dreamer, and telling him to get some real money before asking for her hand. The others had been kinder, but no less firm. "You're a nice man, Mike," one had said, "but I need stability. A farmer's life is too uncertain." Each rejection chipped away at Michael's hope. Was it possible that even here, in this quiet village far from the city's glittering facade, money still ruled the heart? Michael shook himself out of his thoughts, standing up from the pew. The church was empty now, its shadows long and deep. He knew he couldn't stay there all night. Slowly, he made his way back to his small cottage, the sound of his boots crunching against the gravel road the only accompaniment to his thoughts. As he reached his front door, he paused, looking out at the moonlit fields. Despite everything, he couldn't give up. Somewhere, he believed, there had to be someone who saw past the dirt on his hands and the patched clothes on his back. Someone who would see him for who he truly was. Michael pushed open the door and stepped inside, the faint smell of earth and wood filling the small space. He lit a candle and sat at the worn kitchen table, pulling out a notebook where he had been recording his thoughts. Under tonight's date, he wrote, "Truth revealed. Rejected by Julia. The villagers know my secret. What now?" He stared at the words for a long time before adding, "Keep going. The right person is out there. Don't lose hope." Little did he know, the events of the coming days would test that hope in ways he could never imagine. The next few days passed slowly, the quiet rhythm of farm life acting like a balm on Michael's wounded pride. Each morning, the sun would rise over the rolling hills, casting a golden light on the fields he had come to know intimately. He woke early, ate a simple breakfast of bread and butter, and spent his days with the crops, fixing fences, or cleaning the barns. The work was hard, but it was honest, and for the first time in a long time, Michael felt a sense of accomplishment that didn't come from a paycheck. However, his heart still carried the weight of rejection. Despite the warm greetings from the few villagers who had begun to accept him, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that he was failing at the one thing he had come here to do, find love. One crisp afternoon, as he was mending a fence near the edge of his property, he saw her. Anna. She was walking along the dirt road that ran past his farm, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, wearing a simple dress and carrying a satchel. Michael had noticed her a few times in the village, but he hadn't spoken to her much. Anna was a teacher at the local school, a kind, quiet woman with an air of dignity that set her apart from the other villagers. She didn't seem to fit the usual mold of the women who rejected him so easily, and for some reason, Michael found himself intrigued by her. Anna stopped when she saw him working on the fence. She offered a polite wave. "Hello, Mike," she said softly, her voice like a gentle breeze. "Hello, Anna," Michael replied, straightening up from his task. He wiped his brow, trying to act casual, though his heart was suddenly racing. "How's the school going?" "It's going well, thank you. The children are all excited for the upcoming festival." She smiled, her eyes sparkling with warmth. "How's the farm? Getting the fence fixed up?" Michael chuckled, a little embarrassed. "I'm trying my best. It's harder than I expected, but I'm learning." Anna took a step closer, studying the fence. "It looks like you're doing a good job," she said, her tone sincere. "You've been working hard." Michael smiled, feeling a flicker of something he hadn't felt in days, appreciation. Not for the work itself, but for the way Anna spoke to him. She wasn't looking at him like he was some poor farmer pretending to be something he wasn't. She was looking at him like he was simply Mike, the man trying to make his way in a world he didn't quite understand. "I'm glad you think so," he replied. "It's been an interesting change of pace, to say the least." Anna nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I can imagine. It's a big shift from the city, isn't it?" Michael paused, caught off guard by her perceptiveness. "Yeah, it is. But it's what I needed. I wanted to get away from the city life for a while, to see if I could find something real." Anna glanced at him, her gaze steady. "Something real?" He hesitated, but for some reason, he found himself compelled to share more. I'm tired of people loving me for what I have. For my money, my status. I wanted to know if there's someone who could love me for me. Not for the things I can give, but for who I am. Anna's eyes softened. There was no judgment in her gaze, just quiet understanding. I think that's a noble goal, she said gently. Michael's heart fluttered. He couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to him like that, as though his heart mattered more than his wallet. So, Michael stammered, unsure of how to continue. I'm still getting used to all of this. The work, the quiet, but I'm starting to think it's exactly what I needed. Anna smiled again, her eyes lighting up. It seems like you're adjusting well. I'm sure the village is glad to have you here. Michael smiled back, a little unsure. Well, some people are still getting used to me. Not everyone's too happy with a city boy trying to be a farmer. He shrugged, trying to keep the mood light. But I'm not giving up. Anna's gaze lingered on him for a moment, and Michael couldn't help but wonder what she was thinking. After a long pause, she spoke again. I think you'll do just fine here, Mike. It's good to have someone who cares about the land and the people. The simplicity of her words struck him, and he felt a strange warmth spread through him. Maybe, just maybe, there was someone in this village who could see beyond the surface. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the sound of the wind rustling through the trees the only noise between them. Finally, Anna spoke again, her voice soft. I should get going. I've got some lesson planning to do. Of course, Michael said, reluctantly breaking the spell that had settled between them. I'll let you get back to it. Thanks for stopping by. Anna gave him a small, genuine smile. Anytime, Mike. Then she turned and walked away, her footsteps light on the dirt path. Michael watched her disappear into the distance, feeling an unfamiliar sense of hope blossoming in his chest. There was something about Anna, her kindness, her quiet strength, that drew him in. She hadn't rejected him. She hadn't treated him as a poor farmer. She had treated him as an equal. Could she be the one he had been searching for? Could she see past the lies and the facade to the man he truly was? The question lingered in his mind as he returned to his work, but for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel alone. There was a possibility now, a flicker of light in the darkness, and Michael was determined to see where it would lead. The following days were quieter, the rhythm of farm life settling into a routine. Michael woke early each morning, fed the animals, and spent his afternoons working the fields. Despite the physical exhaustion, a certain peace began to settle over him. The constant pressure of wealth and expectations from his old life seemed to be slowly dissolving, and with it, the anxiety that had once defined his every move. But there was still something missing. Anna's face lingered in his mind long after their conversation by the fence. Her calm demeanor, the way she had listened to him without judgment, had left an imprint on him. He had felt seen, not as the man with money, but as Mike, the one who had dared to dream of something genuine. For the first time, he felt a spark of hope. Maybe there was a way to truly be loved for who he was. It had been 3 days since their conversation, and Michael found himself looking out for Anna every time he stepped outside. He knew she taught at the village school, and he often passed the small, one-story building on his way to the market. But he had never been brave enough to stop and talk to her. The thought of it made him nervous, unsure if it was too forward. But something told him that the possibility of something more was worth the risk. That afternoon, as Michael was loading his old truck with crates of vegetables he had harvested, he spotted her walking down the road toward the village square. She was carrying a stack of books in her arms, her long dress swaying with each step. His heart skipped a beat. Without thinking, Michael called out to her, his voice a little rougher than he intended. Anna! She stopped and turned, her face lighting up with a smile when she saw him. Mike, hey, how's the farm today? He set down the crate he was carrying and approached her, his hands brushing the dirt from his jeans. It's going well. I've been trying to get the harvest ready for the market. You know, trying to sell the vegetables around the village. I'm sure they'll sell well, Anna said with a smile. You've put a lot of hard work into it. Michael felt a surge of pride at her words. Thanks, Anna. It's been a learning curve, but I'm getting there. He hesitated, his nerves rising. Hey, I was wondering, maybe I could take you to dinner sometime? I mean, if you're free. I know a place in the village that serves a pretty good stew. Anna blinked, clearly surprised. Michael quickly added, I don't mean to, make you uncomfortable. I just thought it would be nice to. I'd love to, Anna interrupted, her voice warm and genuine. I'd really like that. Michael's breath caught in his chest. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. She hadn't hesitated or made any excuses. She had agreed. Great, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. How about tomorrow night? Around 6? That sounds perfect. Anna smiled, her eyes sparkling with something Michael couldn't quite place. I'm looking forward to it. As she turned to leave, Michael watched her walk away, his heart racing in his chest. His mind raced too. She said yes. She actually said yes. He couldn't remember the last time he had felt this excited about something, about someone. He had come to the village seeking truth, hoping to find real love, and now, for the first time, it seemed within his reach. The next day felt like an eternity to Michael. He spent the morning in a daze, his thoughts constantly drifting to the evening. What would he wear? What would they talk about? Would she like the stew? His nerves were a bundle of energy, his mind swirling with questions he didn't have the answers to. By late afternoon, he had made himself presentable, choosing a simple shirt and jeans. Nothing too flashy, but still something he thought Anna would find acceptable. He spent the next hour pacing around the cottage, checking the clock every few minutes. When the time finally arrived, he left his house and walked to the village square. The small restaurant was a cozy, unassuming place, tucked between two old brick buildings. It had a wooden sign above the door with the name, The Rustic Table, which Michael had heard was a favorite among the locals. As he approached, he saw Anna waiting outside, leaning against the wall, her eyes scanning the square. When she spotted him, she straightened up and smiled. You made it, she said, her voice warm and inviting. Michael smiled back, feeling a wave of relief. Of course, I wouldn't miss it for the world. The two of them entered the restaurant together, and Michael couldn't help but notice how easy it felt. There was no pressure, no tension, just the natural flow of conversation, the comfort of someone who accepted you for who you were. They sat at a small table by the window, and as they perused the menu, Michael couldn't help but ask, So, what's it like teaching in the village? Do you enjoy it? Anna's face lit up at the question. I do. It's not a huge school, but the kids are great. They're eager to learn, and I feel like I can really make a difference. The village is so close-knit, and I love being a part of it. Michael listened intently, genuinely fascinated by her words. It was clear that Anna had a deep connection to the village, to the people, and to her work. Her passion for teaching and the way she spoke about her students made him admire her even more. As the evening wore on, they shared stories about the village, about their pasts, and about their hopes for the future. Michael was surprised to find how much he enjoyed listening to her, how natural it felt to be in her presence. She had a way of making him feel like he wasn't just the billionaire who had run away from his life, but a man who had hopes and dreams, just like anyone else. By the time dinner came to an end, Michael felt a sense of contentment he hadn't felt in years. As they stood up to leave, he couldn't help but ask, Would you like to take a walk? It's a nice evening. Anna agreed, and together they strolled through the village, the cool night air filling their lungs. Michael couldn't remember the last time he'd felt so at ease with someone. You know, Anna said after a while, her voice thoughtful, I've always believed that love is about finding someone who accepts you, flaws and all. Michael turned to look at her, surprised by the depth of her words. I agree, he said, his voice quiet. And I think I've spent too much time chasing the wrong things. I wanted love, but I was looking for it in all the wrong places. Anna stopped walking and looked at him, her expression kind. It's never too late to change that, Mike. For the first time in a long time, Michael felt like the future might be something worth looking forward to. This wasn't just another rejection, another false start. This felt different. It felt real. As they said their goodbyes at her doorstep, Michael took a deep breath. Thanks for tonight, Anna. I really enjoyed it. Anna smiled warmly, her eyes twinkling in the soft light of the street lamp. Me too, Mike. I'm looking forward to the next one. With that, she entered her home, and Michael walked back to his cottage, his heart lighter than it had been in weeks. The journey was just beginning, but for the first time, Michael felt like he was on the right path. The next few weeks in the village passed in a blur of quiet moments and shared experiences. Michael had begun to settle into the rhythms of his new life, working the farm by day and spending evenings with Anna. Their bond deepened with each passing conversation, each simple moment of connection. Michael had always believed that love was something complicated, something that required grand gestures and extravagant promises. But with Anna, everything felt effortless. It was the quiet moments they shared, the way she listened when he spoke, the way her eyes softened when she smiled, that made him feel seen in a way he never had before. The village began to feel like home in ways Michael hadn't anticipated. He had arrived expecting to find answers, to uncover a way of living that was authentic, and in many ways, he had. But it was Anna who had become the unexpected revelation. One chilly evening, as they sat on the porch of his cottage after dinner, wrapped in blankets to ward off the evening's chill, Michael turned to Anna, his heart suddenly full of words he hadn't expected to say. "You know," he began slowly, "when I first came here, I thought I was running from something. I thought I was running from my wealth, my life in the city. But now, I'm starting to realize that I was running towards something, or rather someone." Anna looked at him, her expression soft and gentle. "Someone?" she asked, a slight smile tugging at her lips. Michael nodded, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "You." There was a pause, the sound of the wind rustling through the trees filling the silence between them. Anna didn't immediately respond, but she didn't need to. Her eyes, warm and understanding, spoke volumes. "I wasn't sure if I was ready for this," Michael continued, his voice quieter now. "But every time I'm with you, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. You make me feel real." Anna's gaze softened, and she reached out, placing a hand on his. "You are real, Mike. And I think that's what makes you so special." Michael's heart skipped a beat at her words. It was the first time anyone had ever said something like that to him. Something that made him feel valued for the person he was, not the person people thought him to be. "I didn't expect any of this," he admitted, his voice hushed. "I didn't expect to find someone who saw me for who I really am. I didn't expect to find someone who cared." Anna's fingers gently squeezed his hand. "I think you just needed to believe in it." "I know I did." For a long moment, they simply sat in the comfortable silence, the world around them still and peaceful. Michael had never felt so content, so at peace with the world. But as much as he cherished the quiet, there was something he knew he needed to say. "Anna, I'm not sure how to say this, but I need to be honest with you. I wasn't entirely upfront when we first met." Anna raised an eyebrow, her gaze curious but not alarmed. "What do you mean?" Michael exhaled deeply, his chest tightening with the weight of the words he was about to speak. "I'm not just a poor farmer, Anna. I am, but I wasn't always like this." He paused, looking into her eyes. "I used to be someone else. Someone with money. A lot of it." Anna's expression didn't change. She didn't look shocked or disappointed. Instead, she simply waited for him to continue. "I did it because I wanted to see if I could find someone who would love me for who I really am. Not for the money, not for the image, just me." There was no judgment in Anna's eyes, only understanding. "I figured something like that might be true," she said softly. "You never seemed like the kind of person who wanted to flaunt wealth." Michael blinked, surprised by her calm response. "You knew?" "I didn't know for sure," Anna said, her voice steady. "But I had a feeling. And honestly, it didn't matter to me. The man I've gotten to know is someone kind, hardworking, and genuine. That's the man I care about." Michael felt a wave of relief wash over him, the tension in his chest easing. He had feared that revealing his past would be the end of their relationship, but instead, Anna's response had only strengthened the connection between them. "I'm glad you didn't turn away," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "Why would I?" Anna asked, her tone gentle. "You're the same person I've come to know. The wealth doesn't change who you are." Michael smiled, a slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes. It was as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. For the first time in years, he felt completely accepted, flaws and all. Their bond, however it had started, was something much deeper than either of them had expected. And it felt like the beginning of something beautiful. Days turned into weeks, and Michael's life in the village continued to evolve. His farm was flourishing more than he had ever imagined. The community embraced him in ways he had never experienced in the city, and his connection with Anna grew stronger with every passing day. One afternoon, after spending the morning harvesting crops, Michael found himself walking toward Anna's school. The sun was high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the village, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose that had been missing for so long. As he approached the school, he noticed Anna standing outside, talking to a few of her students. She was laughing, her smile bright and full of life, and for a moment, Michael just stood there, watching her. There was a peacefulness to the way she interacted with the children, a kindness that radiated from her. Michael couldn't help but admire her even more. When she finally noticed him standing there, she waved and walked over. "Hey, Mike, what's up?" "I was just thinking about how lucky I am," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "Oh." Anna raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Lucky to have found a place like this, and lucky to have found someone like you." Anna's smile softened. "I think I'm the lucky one." Michael shook his head. "I don't think I've ever felt more at peace in my life. The farm, the village, and most importantly," he paused, his heart thumping in his chest, "you." Anna's expression softened, and she reached for his hand, holding it gently. "You've come a long way, Mike, and I'm glad you're here." Michael squeezed her hand, the warmth of her touch grounding him in that moment. He had come to the village searching for something real, something that didn't exist in the world of wealth and status. And now, he had found it, not just in the simplicity of rural life, but in Anna. "I don't know what the future holds," Michael said, his voice quiet but firm, "but I know I want you to be a part of it." Anna smiled, her eyes sparkling with a mix of warmth and affection. "I think we're already on the right path, Mike." And for the first time in a long time, Michael believed it. Michael's heart soared as he stood there with Anna, her hand in his, feeling the warmth of the connection between them. The future felt uncertain, yet it had never felt so full of potential. In the quiet village, he was no longer the man trapped in a world of superficiality and expectation. With Anna, everything felt different, real, grounded. But despite the contentment he felt, doubts still lingered at the back of his mind. The truth about his past was out now. Anna knew who he really was, and despite her initial acceptance, Michael couldn't help but wonder, what would happen if she ever learned the full extent of his past? Would it change things between them? Would she look at him differently once she understood just how far removed he was from the life she had always known? They continued to spend time together, enjoying each other's company in simple ways. They'd take long walks through the countryside, discussing everything from trivial matters to deep, personal reflections. Sometimes they'd sit in the small cafe in the village square, enjoying coffee as they watched life go by, people laughing and talking as they went about their day. There was something magical about those moments, something fleeting, yet lasting. But it wasn't just Anna's presence that kept him grounded. He had found a new purpose in life, one that didn't rely on wealth or status. The farm, though challenging, had given him a sense of accomplishment he had never experienced in his former life. The days spent tending to the land, the animals, and learning the ins and outs of rural life had provided a deeper satisfaction than he could have ever imagined. He was finally living in the way he had always hoped to, away from the facades, the expectations, and the weight of his former life. Yet, there was still one question that tugged at Michael's heart, something he had never fully addressed. It was time to confront it. Anna had been open with him about her life, her work as a teacher, her love for the village, and her dream of making a difference in the lives of the children she taught. She had shown him the side of life he had never truly seen before, one that was simple but profound. Now it was his turn to open up to her about his past. Not just the bits and pieces he had shared, but the whole truth. The life he had left behind. The world of luxury, business deals, and boardrooms. The empire he had once built. The wealth he had left at the door of the village. It wasn't a matter of wanting to confess. It was a matter of wanting to be completely honest with her. To let her in, fully. He wanted Anna to know him, all of him, just as he had come to know her. One evening, after a long day of work on the farm, Michael invited Anna over to his cottage. They had dinner together, and as the evening wore on, the conversation flowed easily, the quiet comfort of their connection filling the space between them. Yet, the weight of his confession lingered on Michael's mind. When they finished eating, Michael leaned back in his chair, studying Anna's face, trying to find the right words. "Anna, there's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice a little hesitant. Anna's expression softened, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "What is it, Mike?" He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "I've been thinking about this for a while now. I told you that I used to be wealthy, that I left my life behind to come here. But I didn't tell you the whole story." Anna didn't interrupt. She just waited, patient, calm. Michael continued, "I wasn't just some businessman. I was one of the top CEOs of a multinational company. I had everything: money, power, influence. I built a vast empire. The kind of life where people looked at me and saw only what I could give them, not who I was. I wasn't just a businessman, Anna. I was at the top of the corporate ladder. A billionaire." He paused, allowing the silence to stretch between them. The words had come out faster than he expected, and now that they were said, he waited for her reaction. Anna sat still for a moment, absorbing the information. Then, slowly, she spoke. "You're telling me you were a billionaire?" Her voice was calm, but there was a hint of surprise in her tone. Michael nodded. "Yes. I know it might seem hard to believe, given the life I'm living now, but it's the truth. I walked away from all of it because I wanted to find something real. I didn't want people to love me for my wealth. I wanted to know if there was someone who could love me for who I really am. Not for the money, not for the status." He looked down at his hands, suddenly feeling vulnerable. "I don't expect you to understand it, but I needed to be honest with you. I wanted you to know the full truth." Anna was quiet for a long time, her gaze thoughtful. Michael's heart raced as he waited for her to speak. He had prepared himself for any reaction, from shock to disbelief, maybe even anger. But what he didn't expect was the smile that slowly spread across Anna's face. "I'm glad you told me," she said softly, "and I think it makes sense. I knew there was more to your story than just being a poor farmer. But the man I've gotten to know is not the billionaire you once were. He's someone kind, humble, and honest. He's someone who is doing what he loves and finding meaning in the simplest of things. That's who I care about." Michael felt a wave of relief wash over him. It was as though a weight had been lifted from his chest, a burden he hadn't realized he was carrying. "You're not angry?" he asked, still unsure of what to think. Anna shook her head. "No, not at all. I'm just happy that you're here with me, that you're living the life you truly want. And I'm grateful that you trusted me enough to share this with me." Michael reached for her hand, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you for understanding. I was afraid it would change things between us." Anna squeezed his hand gently. "Nothing changes, Mike. The only thing that matters is who you are now, and that's the person I care about." As the evening drew to a close, Michael felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had come to the village looking for something real, something grounded, and now, for the first time, he felt like he had found it. Not just in the land, or the work, but in the woman sitting across from him. Someone who had shown him that true love wasn't about wealth or status. It was about honesty, vulnerability, and connection. They sat in silence for a while, simply enjoying the warmth of each other's presence. Michael had faced the fear of his past being revealed, and in doing so, he had learned something important. Love, when it's real, doesn't require perfection. It just requires truth. And with Anna, he had found something he hadn't even realized he was looking for. The days following Michael's confession were filled with a sense of quiet understanding between him and Anna. The weight of his past, once a looming presence in his mind, seemed to dissipate. He had been honest with her, and in return, she had shown him acceptance, something he had never truly experienced in the world of high society. Life on the farm continued to be a challenge, but Michael found himself growing more attached to the simplicity of it all. He spent his mornings working the fields, tending to the animals, and learning the rhythms of rural life. It wasn't glamorous, And it wasn't easy, but it was real. He could feel the earth beneath his hands, the satisfaction of seeing his hard work come to fruition in the crops that grew, the animals that flourished. Every day brought new lessons, new victories, and new challenges. Anna, too, had her own daily routines. She taught at the local school, and Michael would sometimes meet her for lunch or accompany her on her walks back home in the evening. Their relationship felt as though it was growing deeper with each passing moment, and Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude toward her. She had shown him a kind of love that he hadn't known existed, a love that was built on mutual respect, shared values, and understanding. Yet, despite all the warmth that existed between them, Michael knew that there were still challenges ahead. The village was small, and word had begun to spread about the rich man who had come to work the farm. Some people were curious, others skeptical. They wondered what his true intentions were, and if he would eventually grow tired of the hard work and return to his life of luxury. One afternoon, as Michael was finishing up his chores, he noticed a few people from the village standing near the fence. They were whispering among themselves, casting sidelong glances in his direction. Michael knew that the rumors were starting to swirl, and he had a sinking feeling that some of the village's skepticism was beginning to seep into Anna's circles as well. That evening, as they sat together at the small cafe in the village square, Michael decided it was time to address the growing whispers. "Anna," he began carefully, his eyes meeting hers, "I've noticed people talking. They're starting to wonder about me, about what I'm really doing here. Some of them don't believe I'm serious about staying. They think I'll get tired of the work and go back to my old life." Anna's face softened with understanding. "I've heard the whispers too," she said, her tone calm but firm. "But it doesn't matter, Mike. What matters is that you're here now, doing what you love, and you're not pretending to be something you're not. People will talk, but that's their problem, not ours." Michael nodded, grateful for her unwavering support. But deep down, he couldn't ignore the nagging fear that this uncertainty could threaten the fragile peace they had built. "I know," he said, his voice quiet, "but I want to make sure you're not caught in the middle of all this. I don't want people to question your choices because of me." Anna reached across the table and took his hand in hers. "Mike, I'm not going to let anyone's opinions change how I feel. What we have is real, and that's what matters." The words meant everything to him. For the first time in years, Michael felt truly seen. Not for his wealth, his status, or his past, but for the person he was becoming in this quiet, simple life. But he knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth. The village would need time to fully accept him, and he would need to prove that his decision to stay was genuine. The next few days were filled with the hum of daily life, but the undercurrent of tension remained. Michael found himself questioning whether he had truly made the right decision in leaving behind the world he once knew. Was it really possible to build a new life here, in the village, far from the comfort and familiarity of his previous existence? Could he sustain this life, the one he had chosen for its authenticity and simplicity? One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Michael and Anna took a walk along the dirt path that wound through the fields. The sky was painted in hues of orange and purple, the air cool with the promise of night. "I've been thinking," Michael began, breaking the silence between them, "about the future, about us." Anna looked up at him, her face serene. "What about it?" "I don't want to keep hiding," he said quietly. "I want to be a part of this community, not just as someone who's passing through. I want to prove to everyone, to myself, that I can build something here. Something real." Anna smiled gently, squeezing his hand. "You're already doing it. You're building a life here, one step at a time. And I'm right here with you." Michael felt a rush of gratitude toward her. Her faith in him, her unwavering belief in their connection, meant more than he could express in words. But there was still one thing he needed to do. The next day, after finishing his work on the farm, Michael made a decision. He was going to address the village, not just to explain himself, but to make it clear that his commitment to the life he had chosen was genuine. He stood in the village square, surrounded by the familiar faces of the townspeople. It was early evening, and the village was quiet, save for the distant chirping of crickets. The townspeople gathered around, some curious, others apprehensive, but all eyes were on him as he stood before them. "Hello, everyone," Michael began, his voice steady but carrying an undertone of sincerity. "I know there's been a lot of talk about me lately, about why I came here, what my intentions are. And I want to take a moment to address those questions, because I owe it to you all to be honest." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "When I first arrived in the village, I was searching for something real. I left behind a life of luxury, a life of expectations, because I wanted to know if there was more to life than wealth and status. And what I found here, in this village, has been more than I ever could have imagined. I found a place where I can be myself, a place where I don't have to pretend to be someone I'm not." He looked around the gathered crowd, meeting the eyes of several villagers who had been skeptical. "I know that some of you have your doubts, but I want you to know that I'm not here to take anything from this village. I'm here to give, to be a part of this community and to prove that it's not about money or status. It's about building something that matters, something real. I'm not just here because I'm looking for a way out. I'm here because I believe in the life we can build together." There was a long pause, the silence hanging in the air. For a moment, it felt like the whole village was holding its breath, waiting for his words to sink in. Finally, one of the older men in the crowd, a farmer who had lived in the village his whole life, stepped forward. "I don't know you, boy," he said gruffly, "but I respect a man who can stand up and speak the truth. If you're serious about sticking around, then show us you're willing to work like the rest of us. We'll see what kind of man you really are." Michael nodded, his heart racing with a mix of anticipation and resolve. "I'm ready. I've already started working, and I'll keep working, just like everyone else." The crowd was quiet for a moment longer, and then, slowly, the tension seemed to ease. The older man gave a small nod before turning away, and the villagers began to disperse, murmuring among themselves. Anna, who had been standing by Michael's side during the speech, smiled at him, her eyes filled with pride. "You did well," she said softly. Michael took a deep breath, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. The first step had been taken, and while the road ahead would still be uncertain, he knew that he was on the right path. With Anna by his side and the village beginning to accept him for who he truly was, he felt ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. And for the first time in a long while, Michael was sure of one thing. He was home. As the weeks went by, Michael's commitment to his new life in the village became more evident to everyone around him. He woke up early every morning to work the farm, helping out wherever he could, learning more about the land, and becoming increasingly integrated into the rhythm of the village. The initial skepticism that had surrounded his presence began to fade, and the villagers started to accept him, albeit cautiously. They watched him work, observed his dedication, and began to recognize that he was no longer the man who had walked into their community with an air of mystery and grandeur. He had earned their respect, one small task at a time. Anna, too, had noticed the changes in Michael. She watched him as he put his all into the work, not because he had to, but because he genuinely wanted to be part of this life. His hands, once used to the sterile, polished environment of boardrooms and penthouses, were now calloused from hours of manual labor, and his face, once perfectly groomed, now showed the signs of someone who had embraced the sweat and toil of farm life. But despite this sense of belonging that Michael had found, there were still whispers, not from the villagers anymore, but from those he had left behind, the people from his past life. In the weeks following his move to the village, Michael had received a few phone calls from old business associates, trying to tempt him back into the fold of the corporate world. His former colleagues, who had once treated him as a king, now treated him like a ghost. They would remind him of the opportunities he was turning down, the potential he was wasting by remaining in the village. One afternoon, while Michael was working on the farm, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. He hesitated for a moment, but then answered. "Michael," a familiar voice said on the other end. It was Nathan, his former business partner. "I've been hearing some things, and I wanted to check in. You're not thinking of staying there, are you? This whole farm life thing is just a phase, right?" Michael could feel the pressure mounting in Nathan's voice, the same tone he had used when he wanted to convince Michael to go along with one of their risky ventures. "It's not a phase," Michael replied, his voice steady but firm. "I'm done with that world, Nathan. I'm building something real here." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Michael could almost hear Nathan's disbelief. Real? Nathan scoffed. Mike, you're talking about leaving millions on the table, about walking away from everything you've built. You think the village is going to give you the kind of life you really want? You've got a future that's waiting for you back here, with us. Come back, and we'll make you even richer. Michael took a deep breath. He had known this conversation would come eventually, but hearing the desperate attempt to pull him back into his old life, made him more certain of his decision than ever before. I'm not interested in going back, Nathan. I don't want that life anymore. Nathan let out a frustrated sigh. You're making a huge mistake, Mike. I thought you were smarter than this. Michael didn't reply right away. He simply ended the call, feeling the weight of his former life pressing against him, trying to drag him back into a world he no longer wanted to be a part of. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Michael sat outside on the porch of his small cottage, staring out over the fields. He could hear Anna's soft footsteps approaching behind him. She sat down beside him, her presence calm and reassuring. You look troubled, Anna observed, her voice gentle. Is everything okay? Michael turned to face her, the deep unease from the phone call still lingering in his chest. I just got a call from my old business partner, Nathan. He's trying to pull me back into the world I left behind. Anna's face softened in understanding. He doesn't want to see you change. He probably doesn't understand why you'd give it all up. Michael nodded. I know, but it's more than that. There's pressure, Anna. I built that empire with my own hands, and now they're telling me I'm throwing it all away. The money, the status. It's hard not to feel like I'm letting go of something big. Anna placed a reassuring hand on his. You're not letting go of anything, Mike. You're gaining something. This life, this village, this farm, and most importantly, this love we're building. It's real. You found something here that can't be measured by money. Michael took a deep breath, her words grounding him. He had left behind a world that was built on fleeting things, money, power, superficial relationships, and had come to a place where every decision he made had meaning. There was value in hard work, in the sweat and effort that went into something tangible, something lasting. But the pull of his past, the temptation of wealth and influence, was never far from his mind. As the days went on, Michael wrestled with the internal battle. He had built a new life, yes, but what if he was just kidding himself? What if he was wrong, and the corporate world, the world of luxury and influence, was where he truly belonged? He started to second-guess himself more often. His former colleagues had always told him he was destined for greatness. Greatness that involved being at the top of the corporate ladder, not farming in a quiet village. One night, after another long day of work, Michael received another call from Nathan. This time, the tone was different. It wasn't as confrontational, but more of a plea. Mike, I know I was hard on you last time, but I just want you to think about this. You've got everything at your fingertips. The company is doing better than ever, and we need you back. We've got this big deal coming up, and there's no one else who can handle it. I don't want to see you throw away everything we've worked for. Michael's grip tightened around the phone, and for a moment, he was silent. The temptation was real. He could hear the promise of old power, the promise of wealth, the allure of a life he had once embraced. But as he looked out the window, his eyes found Anna in the distance, walking slowly through the fields. The image of her, grounded and real, brought him back to the present. I appreciate everything you've done for me, Nathan, Michael said, his voice steady. But I'm not coming back. This is where I belong. There was a long silence on the other end of the line before Nathan spoke again, his voice filled with disbelief. You're making a mistake, Mike. But fine. Do what you want. Just don't say I didn't warn you. Michael ended the call, feeling a strange sense of peace wash over him. It wasn't that he was completely free from the temptation of his past, but in that moment, he knew that Anna, the village, and the life he was building here were more valuable than anything he could ever achieve through wealth or power. The following days weren't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when the lure of his former life crept into his thoughts. But each time that happened, Michael would remember why he had come here in the first place, to find something real. And that was something that no amount of money could ever give him. Anna, too, became more than just his partner in life. She became his anchor, the one who kept him grounded when the storm of his past threatened to pull him away. Together, they were building something that was stronger than the world Michael had left behind. Something that was rooted in honesty, hard work, and a love that could not be bought. And as the seasons changed and the farm flourished, Michael knew one thing for sure. The real test of loyalty wasn't about where he came from or how much money he had. It was about the life he had chosen to live, and the woman who had chosen to live it with him.